A simple purchase, a life-changing moment. The afternoon sun hung low over Los Angeles, casting golden rays through the massive glass windows of Reeves Auto Design, one of the most exclusive luxury car dealerships in the country. Keanu Reeves, dressed in his signature black leather jacket and dark jeans, stepped inside the sleek showroom. There was no grand entrance, no flashing cameras, no entourage, just him. Employees at the dealership had seen him before, but his presence always carried an air of quiet humility. This was his own dealership, a project he had invested in not for profit, but for his love of automobiles, a place where design met performance in its purest form. But today, something about his visit felt different. As Keanu walked past the gleaming sports cars, a young sales assistant nudged a colleague, whispering excitedly, "Is that really him?" "Yeah. He comes in now and then. But he's never made a purchase himself. Until now." And it was true. Keanu had helped design one of the most remarkable vehicles in the showroom. A stunning, midnight black supercar. It had everything he had dreamed of in a vehicle: power, precision, and a subtle elegance that spoke louder than any flashy exterior. And today, he was finally going to own one. But just as the sales associate handed him the keys, a hushed, emotional conversation from the waiting area caught his attention. A conversation that changed everything. A few feet away, near the dealership's plush waiting lounge, a couple stood talking in hushed voices. Their body language was tense, and their words carried an undeniable weight of sorrow. Keanu didn't mean to eavesdrop, but something about their conversation made him stop cold in his tracks. "We can't afford it. Not after everything with Emma," the man whispered, running a hand through his short, dark hair. "But we promised her," the woman replied, her voice trembling. "This is her dream." Keanu's fingers hovered over the car keys, his grip loosening. There was something in the way they spoke, a rawness, an ache. He discreetly turned his head, trying not to stare but unable to ignore their words. The man, tall and visibly weary, held an exhausted strength in his posture. His wife, Keanu assumed, clutched a small, tattered notebook in her hands. The edges were worn, filled with scribbled notes and colorful drawings, possibly by a child. "Emma would understand if we waited," the man continued, his voice breaking. "She's strong, just like her mom." Keanu felt his chest tighten. He had been through his own share of pain, of loss, of moments where kindness from a stranger made all the difference. And now he found himself wondering, who was Emma? What had happened to her? And why did the words "her dream" echo in his mind like an unanswered call? For a moment, the entire dealership faded into the background. The polished supercars, the idle chatter of customers, even the soft classical music playing in the background, all of it blurred. Keanu was no longer thinking about his purchase. He was thinking about them. A question that would change lives. The sales associate continued speaking about the car's features, but Keanu lifted a hand slightly, signaling them to pause. His decision had already been made, but not in the way anyone expected. Without hesitation, he stepped toward the couple. His movements were slow, deliberate, but there was a quiet determination in his expression. "Excuse me," he said, his voice gentle yet firm. The couple turned abruptly. The moment they recognized him, their eyes widened in disbelief. Keanu Reeves, a man they had only seen on movie screens, was standing right in front of them. For a split second, there was an awkward silence, as if they weren't sure whether to be shocked, honored, or confused. Keanu offered a small smile, his gaze flickering to the notebook the woman clutched so tightly. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he continued, his tone genuine, "but I couldn't help but overhear. Would you mind sharing a little about Emma?" The woman instinctively held the notebook closer to her chest. The man hesitated, his jaw tightening, clearly protective of their story. But something in Keanu's expression made them trust him. Finally, the woman swallowed hard and spoke. "Emma is our daughter," she said softly. "She's 8. Keanu's breath stilled. 8. She's been fighting leukemia for 2 years now. The woman continued, her voice thick with emotion. Keanu didn't interrupt. He just listened. She loves cars, the man added quietly, his voice breaking. Especially yours. The woman let out a soft, shaky laugh as she opened the notebook, revealing a child's sketch. Keanu leaned in slightly. On the page was a hand-drawn picture of a convertible sports car, the wind rushing through the hair of a little stick-figure girl. She has this dream, the woman continued, her voice now just above a whisper, of going to the Grand Canyon in a convertible, feeling the wind in her hair, just like in the movies. She talks about it all the time. Keanu's chest ached. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about luxury. It was about a little girl's dream. And at that moment, Keanu knew what he had to do. The decision that shocked everyone. Keanu didn't hesitate. He turned toward the sales manager standing behind the counter. Get them the best convertible we have. On me. The dealership went silent. The sales manager blinked, confused. Yes, sir. Keanu's voice was calm but unwavering. I want them to have a car for Emma's trip. No paperwork, no charges. Just make it happen. The couple gasped, the woman's hands trembling as she covered her mouth. Mr. Reeves, we can't accept that. It's too much. Keanu smiled gently. It's not too much. It's exactly what needs to happen. Tears welled in the woman's eyes, and the man, a man who had clearly fought to be strong for his family, suddenly looked like he might break. But why? He asked, his voice raw with emotion. Keanu met his gaze. Because if I were Emma, I'd want that drive too. The woman burst into tears, clutching the notebook against her chest. The man turned away for a moment, composing himself, before finally looking back at Keanu. I don't know how to thank you, he said, his voice shaking. Keanu chuckled lightly. Just take that trip. And tell Emma I said she's awesome. A drive that meant more than money. A few days later, Emma sat in the passenger seat of a brand new convertible, her tiny hands gripping the dashboard as the wind whooshed through her short, soft curls. Her parents sat in the front, laughter filling the car as they drove toward the Grand Canyon. In the back seat, nestled between a stuffed bear and a sketchbook full of cars, lay a simple note. It read, Emma, keep chasing your dreams. Your friend, Keanu. And just like that, one moment of kindness became a memory that would last a lifetime. The road to a dream and the ripple of kindness. The road stretched endlessly before them, bathed in the golden hues of a setting sun. The desert air was crisp yet warm, and the sky above was painted in soft shades of lavender and burnt orange. Emma sat in the front seat of the sleek convertible, her tiny hands gripping the dashboard, her eyes filled with wonder. The wind rushed past her face, lifting the short tufts of her hair as she laughed, a sound that hadn't been heard nearly enough in the past 2 years. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about hospitals, IV drips, or whispered conversations that always stopped the moment she walked into the room. She wasn't just a child fighting leukemia. She was an explorer, a dreamer, a little girl on an adventure. Her father, Ryan, glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his grip tightening slightly on the steering wheel. It was the happiest he had seen his daughter in months. The sight of her, carefree and full of life, made the corners of his eyes sting. His wife, Olivia, reached over and gave his hand a gentle squeeze, as if she, too, could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them. This wasn't just a car ride. This was a gift, a fleeting piece of magic given to them by a stranger who had, in just a few words, changed their lives forever. Keanu Reeves. Even now, Ryan still found it impossible to believe that someone like him, a man who had no reason to care, had stepped in and done something so extraordinary for them. No cameras, no publicity, just a genuine act of kindness. Emma giggled, stretching her arms out wide as the wind played between her fingers. Mom, Dad, this is exactly how I dreamed it, she squealed. The wind, the sunset, the road, it's perfect. Ryan chuckled, his voice thick with emotion. I think someone knew exactly what they were doing when they gave us this car. Emma turned toward him, her eyes twinkling. You mean Keanu? Olivia laughed. Yeah, sweetie. Keanu. Emma thought about that for a moment, then tilted her head toward the sky, as if speaking directly to him. Thank you, Keanu. You're the best. A message from a stranger. Back in Los Angeles, Keanu sat in his dimly lit living room, nursing a glass of whiskey as the city lights twinkled outside his floor-to-ceiling windows. The day had been long, and though he had done 1,000 interviews, 100 photo shoots, and attended countless Hollywood events over the years, none of it had felt as fulfilling as what had happened at his dealership. The simple act of giving, of stepping into someone else's story and making a difference. That was real. That was what mattered. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from one of his dealership's employees. Hey, boss, just wanted to share this with you. Thought you'd like to see it. Attached was a short video. Curious, Keanu clicked the link, and immediately, his screen filled with the image of a little girl laughing as she rode in the convertible. His breath hitched. Emma. The video was filmed from the back seat, capturing her joy, her excitement, the way she stretched her hands toward the sky, as if she were touching the clouds. In the background, her parents could be heard laughing, crying, whispering words of gratitude. Keanu felt something tighten in his chest. Then, at the very end of the video, Emma looked directly into the camera and grinned. Thank you, Keanu. You're the best. He exhaled slowly, a rare, genuine smile tugging at his lips. He had done a lot of things in his life. Acted in blockbuster films, met world leaders, walked the most prestigious red carpets. But nothing, compared to this. Without hesitation, he typed a response. Tell them it was my honor. And tell Emma, she's the real superstar. The story goes viral. A few days later, the world woke up to a story that no one had expected. It started small, a single social media post from a witness at the dealership who had seen the entire exchange unfold. Then came a blog post, a tweet, a news article. And before long, the headline was everywhere. Keanu Reeves secretly gifts sick child her dream road trip. The internet erupted. Fans flooded the comments with admiration. Keanu Reeves is the kindest man in Hollywood. He doesn't just play heroes. He is one. But what shocked Keanu the most was the chain reaction that followed. People started paying it forward. A businessman in Chicago donated a car to a struggling single mother who had lost hers in an accident. A woman in London covered the hospital bills for a child she had never met. A teenager in Tokyo started a fundraiser to send terminally ill children on dream vacations. One act of kindness had ignited a movement, an invitation that meant everything. One morning, Keanu's assistant knocked on his office door, holding an envelope. "This just arrived for you," she said, placing it on his desk. Keanu picked it up and immediately recognized the small, childlike handwriting on the front. With careful fingers, he opened the envelope and pulled out a drawing. It was a picture of a car, with a little girl sitting in the front seat, her hands raised in joy. Above it, written in bright, wobbly letters, were the words, "Dear Keanu, thank you for making my dream come true. I wish you could have come with us. Love, Emma." Keanu stared at the note, his throat tight. Then he noticed something else inside the envelope, a formal invitation. A small note, written in Olivia's handwriting. Read, "Emma is having a celebration party next weekend to mark her journey back to health. You gave her the best day of her life. If you're free, we'd love for you to join us." Keanu leaned back in his chair, smiling softly. He had been to 1,000 celebrity events, sat in 1,000 VIP seats. But this was the most important invitation of all. A moment he would never forget. A week later, Keanu stood outside a small suburban home in Arizona, feeling an odd sense of nervousness. But the moment Emma came running out the front door, her arms outstretched, her face alight with pure joy. Any hesitation he felt melted away. "Ki'enenu," she squealed. He laughed, crouching down just in time for her to throw her arms around his neck. And in that moment, he realized something powerful. This wasn't about cars or money or fame. This was about connection, about humanity, about what we choose to do with the moments we are given. And as he sat down with Emma and her family, listening to stories, sharing laughter, he knew one thing for sure. Kindness would always be his greatest role. A chain of kindness that would never break. Keanu Reeves sat at a small outdoor table in Emma's backyard, watching the sun begin to dip below the Arizona horizon. The air was warm but carried a gentle evening breeze, rustling through the trees and making the small string lights above twinkle like stars. The party had been going on for hours, and yet he couldn't bring himself to leave. Emma, now full of cake and laughter, sat beside him on the patio steps, swinging her little legs back and forth as she studied him with an expression of pure curiosity. "You know what, Keanu?" she said, tilting her head. "You don't act like a famous person." Keanu chuckled, taking a sip of his iced tea. "And what do famous people act like?" Emma shrugged. "I don't know, but I think they probably don't sit on porches eating cake with little kids like me." He set his drink down and leaned in slightly, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "Well, maybe I was never meant to be that kind of famous person." Emma grinned. "I like that." Her father, Ryan, appeared then, rubbing his hands together as he took a seat on the opposite step. His wife, Olivia, followed soon after, carrying a fresh plate of cookies from inside. The two of them still looked at Keanu with quiet amazement, as if trying to convince themselves that this night was real. Ryan sighed, glancing at his daughter, who was now distracted by drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. Then he looked up at Keanu, his expression soft but full of meaning. "I just need you to know," he said, "you didn't just give us a car, or a trip, or a fun day. You gave us something we lost for a long time." Keanu tilted his head slightly, waiting. Ryan exhaled slowly. "Hope." Olivia nodded. "You gave us hope. That no matter how hard things get, no matter how impossible it feels, kindness is still out there." She smiled, her voice thick with emotion. "And now we want to pay it forward." Keanu's brows lifted slightly. "Oh yeah." Ryan sat up straighter, his resolve clear. "We want to start something, a fund or a charity, something that helps families like us. Parents who are fighting for their kids, who just need that one break to remind them they're not alone." Keanu leaned back, a slow smile spreading across his face. This was it. This was what kindness did. It didn't stop. It kept moving, kept growing, kept passing from one heart to another. "That," Keanu said, "is the best idea I've heard in a long time. The birth of a movement." Over the next few weeks, Ryan and Olivia threw themselves into creating what would soon become the Emma's Wish Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping families of children battling serious illnesses. The mission was simple: provide financial relief to struggling families facing overwhelming medical expenses, fund dream trips for children, allowing them to experience something extraordinary, something to hold on to during their toughest battles, support mental and emotional well-being for parents who often carried the silent burden of fear, stress, and exhaustion. Emma, of course, was the foundation's first honorary recipient, but she didn't just want to be helped, she wanted to help. So, she began drawing. Little colorful sketches of dreams, some hers, some belonging to kids she met during her hospital visits, a hot air balloon ride, a day at the ocean, a trip to Disneyland. Each drawing became part of a growing wishboard at their home, a reminder that no dream was too small, no child's hope too insignificant. And Keanu, he wasn't just a donor. He became part of the family. He would check in on Emma regularly, sending her postcards from wherever he was filming, surprising her with small gifts that weren't extravagant but meaningful. A book about cars, a model kit of a convertible, a handwritten note reminding her to keep dreaming big. And behind the scenes, he worked to make sure the foundation had everything it needed to thrive. One evening, after a long meeting with Ryan and Olivia about sponsorships and logistics, Keanu found himself sitting in their kitchen, sipping coffee as they went over details. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, looking both excited and overwhelmed. "I can't believe how fast this is growing. I mean, we were just a regular family. And now we're running a foundation that people all over the country are supporting." Keanu smiled over his mug. Kindness has a way of bringing people together. Olivia sat back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "You know, none of this would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day at the dealership." Keanu set his cup down, shaking his head slightly. "You would have found a way. I just gave you a little push." Ryan chuckled. "Some push. You gave us a car." Keanu grinned. "Okay, maybe a little more than a push." The three of them laughed, the weight of what they were building finally sinking in. This wasn't just about one act of kindness anymore. It was a movement. And it was just getting started. A story that touched the world. It didn't take long for Emma's Wish Foundation to gain national attention. Major news outlets covered the story. How a Hollywood actor's simple act of generosity had sparked something so much bigger. Late-night talk shows picked up the story. Newspapers ran front-page features. And soon, donations began pouring in from across the country. Celebrities took notice. Other actors, musicians, and athletes reached out to contribute. Some even volunteered to grant wishes personally, showing up at hospitals to surprise children with experiences they would never forget. One day, Ryan received a call from an anonymous donor who wanted to fund an entire year of wishes. When he asked why, the voice on the other end simply said, "Because once, someone gave me a second chance, and I promised myself I'd pass it on." And that was how the chain continued. Keanu's single act of kindness had not only changed Emma's life, it had changed hundreds, then thousands of lives. And yet to him, it had never been about recognition. It was about doing what was right. A final drive. 1 year after Emma's dream trip, Keanu found himself back in Arizona, sitting behind the wheel of that same convertible. This time, Emma sat beside him. Her hair had started to grow back, and her laughter was even brighter than before. She had just finished another round of treatments, and the doctors had given her good news. Her condition was improving. "Ready?" Keanu asked, revving the engine playfully. Emma grinned. "Always." And with that, they took off down the road, the wind rushing past them, the sky stretching endlessly ahead, the sound of her joy filling the air. For Keanu, this was more than just a drive. This was proof that kindness never truly ends. It lives on in every life it touches, in every heart it heals, in every dream it helps make a reality. And as they sped down the open road, Emma's arms stretched toward the sky. He knew one thing for sure. He would never stop being part of that. Because in the end, it was never about the car. It was about the journey. The kindness revolution spreads. The sound of laughter and cheers echoed through the grand ballroom of the Emma's Wish Foundation's first official gala, an event that no one could have predicted a year ago. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting golden light over the crowd of guests. Philanthropists, celebrities, doctors, everyday donors, and most importantly, families whose lives had been touched by the foundation's work. At the center of it all, Emma, now 9 years old, stood in a light blue dress, twirling around the dance floor with a wide smile. The hair that had once been lost to chemotherapy had grown back in soft waves, and her eyes, filled with excitement, reflected nothing but life, joy, and gratitude. Keanu Reeves leaned against a table near the back of the room, watching it all unfold. His typical low-profile demeanor made him an observer rather than the center of attention, and that was exactly how he wanted it. This wasn't his night. It was Emma's. It was Ryan and Olivia's. It was a celebration of kindness, resilience, and the undeniable power of human connection. Ryan stepped up to the stage, clearing his throat as he adjusted the microphone. The room quieted, all eyes on him. He glanced down at his daughter, his miracle, his inspiration, and then up at the people gathered before him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "when my wife and I started Emma's Wish Foundation, we had no idea how far it would go. We had no idea that what began as a single act of kindness would grow into a movement that has changed hundreds, no, thousands, of lives. And it all started because one man stopped to listen." A murmur of agreement passed through the audience as heads turned toward Keanu, whose face turned slightly pink under the attention. Ryan smiled. "Keanu, I know you don't like the spotlight, but you need to hear this. Because of you, we have funded over 300 dream trips for children battling life-threatening illnesses. We've paid off hospital bills, funded groundbreaking pediatric research, and helped families keep their homes when medical costs became too much to bear. You didn't just change my family's life. You ignited something that has reached across the world." The crowd erupted into applause, and Keanu, ever the humble one, merely nodded in appreciation, lifting his glass in a silent toast before taking a sip. But before Ryan could continue, a small voice spoke up from the side of the stage. "Wait, Daddy. I want to say something." Emma ran up, her small hands gripping the microphone. She took a deep breath, standing tall, her confidence filling the room in a way that only a child with a second chance at life could. "Mr. Keanu," she said, beaming, "thank you for giving me my wish. But more than that, thank you for helping my mommy and daddy believe in dreams again." Keanu blinked hard. Emma lifted a small envelope in her hands and walked toward him, handing it over with a proud grin. "And now, I have something for you." Curious, Keanu took the envelope and carefully pulled out what was inside, a hand-drawn picture of himself, Emma, and her family, all inside a big convertible, driving toward a colorful sunset. His lips parted slightly as he took in the details. It wasn't just a picture. It was a full-circle moment. "I thought you needed a wish too," Emma said simply. "So, this is my wish for you." Keanu swallowed past the lump in his throat. Then, without thinking, he crouched down and pulled Emma into a warm hug. The crowd cheered, but for Keanu, this wasn't about the noise. It was about the silent, powerful truth in that moment. Kindness had created something bigger than any of them could have ever imagined. The ripple effect. A world inspired. The gala wasn't just a success. It was a turning point. The story of Emma's Wish Foundation and its unlikely beginning with Keanu Reeves continued to inspire people around the world. Social media exploded with stories of people paying it forward. A wealthy entrepreneur in New York pledged $1 million to fund more dream trips. A retired couple in France started a scholarship fund in honor of children who had fought bravely but lost their battles. A group of students in Japan started a Wish Jar initiative, where classmates wrote down small acts of kindness they had done each week. News outlets dubbed it the Kindness Revolution, and it showed no signs of stopping. One day, Keanu sat in his quiet home, flipping through letters that had been sent to him from all over the world. Letters of thanks, stories of kindness, inspired by his one decision to step in at a car dealership. He paused when he came across a particular letter from a single father in Brazil. "Dear Mr. Reeves, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I wanted to thank you. My daughter, Isabella, was diagnosed with a rare blood disorder. I was prepared to sell everything I owned to afford her treatments, but just before I did, a stranger paid off our hospital bills. When I asked why, they simply said, because someone once did it for me. I later learned about your story, the one about Emma and the car. It made me realize that kindness doesn't just help one person. It keeps moving. And now, because of what you started, my little Isabella has a future. Thank you for proving that there is still goodness in the world. With deepest gratitude, Marco and Isabella." Keanu set the letter down and exhaled slowly. This was what mattered. This was what truly lasted. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Ryan. "Hey, brother. Emma just came up with another idea. Call me when you can." Keanu smiled, shaking his head in amusement. That kid never stopped dreaming. And neither would he. One final drive, but not the last ride. A few weeks later, Keanu found himself back in Arizona, sitting once again behind the wheel of that familiar convertible. Only this time, Emma wasn't just in the passenger seat. She was in the driver's seat. "Okay, Keanu," she said seriously, gripping the wheel. "You're gonna teach me how to drive, right?" He laughed. "You're 9, kiddo. Maybe start with go-karts first." She huffed. "Fine, but one day you have to promise me that you'll take me on a real drive." Keanu nodded, extending his pinky. "I promise." They locked pinkies, sealing the deal. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in the same colors as Emma's drawing, Keanu realized something profound. This wasn't just about one act of kindness. It was about every act that followed. And as long as there were dreams to fulfill, roads to travel, and lives to change, he would always be ready to take the wheel. Because kindness wasn't just a moment. It was a journey. And he wasn't done driving yet. A kindness without borders. A few months after the gala, Emma's Wish Foundation had outgrown everything Ryan and Olivia had originally envisioned. What started as a single family's way to give back had become a worldwide movement of generosity and hope. The overwhelming amount of support, from celebrities, business leaders, and ordinary people, was both exhilarating and daunting. Ryan sat at his desk in the foundation's new headquarters in Los Angeles, staring at the piles of letters and proposals stacked before him. Olivia was on the phone in the next room, organizing another fundraiser. And Emma, as usual, was busy coming up with new ideas to help even more kids like her. But as much as their work had expanded, there was one question they had yet to answer. Where do they go next? Keanu Reeves had been a major supporter from the beginning, but even he knew that no movement could survive on one person's kindness alone. It had to be something bigger than him, bigger than Emma, bigger than just a feel-good story. That's why, when Keanu walked into the office that morning, dressed casually in a black hoodie and jeans, his eyes filled with quiet determination, Ryan knew something was about to change. "We need to take this global," Keanu said, taking the seat across from Ryan. "We've done incredible things, but there are kids in places that don't have access to hospitals, treatments, or even a chance to dream. If we're serious about this, we need to reach them too." Ryan exhaled, rubbing his temples. "I agree, but we're already stretched thin. Expanding means more logistics, more funding, more everything." Keanu leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Then let's find a way." And just like that, the next chapter of Emma's Wish Foundation began. A mission across continents. The expansion plan took months of careful preparation. It wasn't just about sending money or resources. It was about creating self-sustaining programs that could thrive long after their team left. Instead of focusing solely on wish granting, they would now work on funding pediatric healthcare initiatives in underprivileged countries, creating scholarship programs for children recovering from long-term illnesses, building community centers where families could access food, counseling, and support networks. Their first major international mission was in a remote village in Kenya, where a small community hospital was struggling to stay open. Without access to proper funding, medicine, or doctors, families had little hope when faced with serious illnesses. Emma had heard about the situation in Kenya from a news article and, in true Emma fashion, had immediately decided they needed to do something about it. Keanu, never one to back down from a challenge, made the first call. "Let's go," he told Ryan. A journey to save a hospital. 3 weeks later, Keanu, Ryan, and a small team of medical professionals touched down in Nairobi, Kenya. From there, they took a rugged hours-long drive into a small rural village, where the nearest hospital was barely functioning. What they saw when they arrived was heartbreaking. The building was falling apart, the electricity unreliable, and there weren't enough medical supplies to go around. The doctors and nurses were doing their best, but it was clear that without immediate help, they wouldn't be able to continue their work. Keanu spent hours talking with the hospital staff, learning about their struggles. He wasn't just a donor. He wanted to understand the people, the needs, the obstacles. And then, standing in the middle of the crumbling hospital, he made a decision. "We're going to rebuild this place," he told Ryan. "From the ground up." Ryan blinked. "You mean renovate?" Keanu shook his head. "No, I mean rebuild. A real hospital, one that can support generations to come." Ryan exhaled, looking around at the crumbling walls and outdated equipment. "That's a massive undertaking." Keanu smirked. "Yeah, but when has that ever stopped us?" The birth of Emma's Children's Hospital, what happened over the next 6 months, was nothing short of extraordinary. With the backing of donors, engineers, and medical professionals from around the world, construction on a brand new children's hospital began. It wasn't just going to be a temporary fix. It was going to be a state-of-the-art facility designed specifically for pediatric care. Doctors from across Africa volunteered their time. Architects and engineers flew in to oversee construction. Local workers were hired, ensuring that the community was directly involved in building its own future. And at the heart of it all was Emma, the little girl who had once only dreamed of a simple car ride. She sent handwritten letters to the children in Kenya, telling them to stay strong. She sent drawings, just as she had done before. And, in a historic moment, she and Keanu video called the hospital staff from Los Angeles, promising that soon, the kids there would have a place where they could heal and dream again. A global phenomenon. Word of the hospital project spread like wildfire. More donations poured in. Governments reached out, asking for help in setting up similar initiatives in their own struggling regions. And then, the moment that changed everything happened. The United Nations officially recognized Emma's Wish Foundation as a global humanitarian initiative. Ryan and Olivia sat in their Los Angeles office, staring at the official invitation from the UN General Assembly, asking them to come and speak about their work. Ryan let out a breathless laugh. "We started this in our living room." Olivia smiled. "And now we're changing the world." A moment of reflection. One evening, long after construction crews had packed up for the night, Keanu sat alone on the edge of the unfinished hospital's foundation. The stars stretched endlessly above him, the sky vast and endless, much like the journey they had taken to get here. He thought about how it all began. A simple day, a car dealership, a conversation overheard, one small act of kindness that had created a wave so big it had reached across continents. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Ryan approaching, hands in his pockets. "You thinking about that day?" Ryan asked, sitting down beside him. Keanu nodded. "Yeah, it still amazes me." Ryan smirked. "What? That you accidentally became the face of a global kindness movement?" Keanu chuckled. "Something like that." He looked out at the construction site, where the hospital was taking shape. "But really, I'm just thinking about how lucky I was to be in the right place at the right time." Ryan shook his head. "No, you were the right person, at the right time." Keanu didn't respond right away. Instead, he simply looked up at the stars. Then, quietly, he said, "I just hope it never stops." Ryan smiled. "I don't think it ever will." And with that, the two men sat there, beneath the African sky, knowing that this was only the beginning. Because kindness was not a moment. It was a movement. And they weren't done yet. The legacy of kindness expands. The early morning air in Nairobi, Kenya, was thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth as the final pieces of Emma's Children's Hospital were put into place. After months of relentless work, countless hours of planning, and an international outpouring of support, the hospital that had once been a distant dream was now a tangible reality. Keanu Reeves stood near the entrance, watching as workers put the finishing touches on the front signage. Emma's Children's Hospital was etched in elegant blue and white letters, a beacon of hope in a community that had, for far too long, struggled without proper medical care. Behind him, Ryan and Olivia stood side by side, holding hands, their eyes filled with awe and disbelief. Just over a year ago, they had been two parents drowning in medical bills, trying to hold on to hope for their own child. Now they were founders of a hospital that would save the lives of countless children they had never even met. A few steps away, Emma herself sat on the hood of a parked Jeep, drawing in her sketchbook. The now 9-year-old had spent the past few months learning everything she could about Kenya, its people, and the children who would soon fill the hospital halls. She had become more than just the inspiration behind the foundation. She was its heart. Keanu glanced at her, smiling softly. It was strange to think that what had started as a simple overheard conversation in a car dealership had led to this moment. A gentle nudge at his elbow brought him out of his thoughts. He turned to see Dr. Amina Khalid, the Kenyan pediatrician who had been one of their strongest allies in bringing the hospital to life. "I hope you're ready for tomorrow," she said, tucking the stray curl behind her ear. "The grand opening is going to be big." Keanu chuckled, running a hand through his hair. "I'm still not sure why people want to hear me speak at things like this." Dr. Khalid laughed. "Because you don't act like the rich and famous. People believe in what you're doing, Keanu, and that's a rare thing." He nodded thoughtfully. It had never been about recognition. Not when he was an actor, and certainly not now. It was about using what he had to create something that mattered. A hospital born from hope. The next morning, the opening ceremony was attended by thousands, locals, doctors, international press, and leaders who had backed the project from the start. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement as families from surrounding villages arrived, eager to see what the new hospital had to offer. For years, the nearest medical facility had been hours away. Many children had lost battles they should have never had to fight, simply because help wasn't accessible. But today, that was changing. Keanu stood on the small stage, microphone in hand, gazing out at the sea of expectant faces. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't a philanthropist in the traditional sense. He was just a man who believed in doing the right thing. "When I first met Emma and her family," Keanu began, his voice steady, "I thought I was just helping one child get her wish. But what I've learned is that kindness is never just about one person. It spreads. It grows. And today, because of Emma, because of her parents, and because of every single person who refused to give up, we are standing in front of a hospital that will help children for generations to come." The crowd erupted in applause, but Keanu barely registered it. His eyes were on Emma, who sat in the front row with a glowing smile on her face. She wasn't just happy, she was proud. And that was all he needed. The Foundation's next step: changing lives worldwide. With the success of Emma's Children's Hospital, the Foundation's mission expanded beyond anything Ryan and Olivia had ever dreamed. What started as a project to fulfill sick children's dreams had now become a full-fledged global initiative aimed at helping vulnerable kids everywhere. Keanu, still very much involved but refusing any official titles, worked behind the scenes to connect the Foundation with the right people: medical experts, engineers, educators, and local leaders from around the world. The Foundation's next move was to establish Emma's Wish outreach centers in multiple countries, places where healthcare and education were often out of reach. These centers would provide medical checkups and vaccinations for children in rural areas, education programs for kids who couldn't afford schooling, emergency aid funds for families dealing with unforeseen crises. One of the first major expansions took place in Brazil, where a devastating flood had left hundreds of families without homes. The Foundation sent teams to provide relief aid, but Keanu and Ryan wanted to do more. Instead of just providing temporary solutions, they worked with local builders and architects to construct permanent, flood-resistant homes for affected families. They didn't just want to fix things in the moment. They wanted to create lasting change. In India, the foundation partnered with doctors to set up mobile medical units that traveled to villages where hospitals were scarce. In Syria, where countless children had been displaced due to war, the foundation funded trauma recovery programs, ensuring that those who had seen the worst of humanity still had a chance at a hopeful future. And through it all, Emma continued to send her hand-drawn letters and sketches to the children who were being helped, reminding them that no matter how far away they were not forgotten. An unexpected encounter that changed everything. Months later, during a trip to Argentina to oversee one of their new outreach programs, Keanu had a chance meeting that shook him to his core. While visiting a newly opened community center funded by the foundation, he met a young girl named Camila. She was around Emma's age, with dark curls and eyes that carried the weight of someone who had seen too much, too soon. Camila's family had lost everything in a recent earthquake. Her father had been injured, and they had been struggling to find stable housing. But despite everything, Camila's spirit remained unbroken. She tugged at Keanu's sleeve as he spoke with the program's director. "Señor Keanu," she said in Spanish, her voice small but confident. Keanu knelt down to her level, smiling. "Sigh, Camila." She hesitated for a moment, then pulled something from her pocket, a folded, slightly crumpled letter. Keanu carefully unfolded it, his eyes scanning the words. It was a thank you note, but more than that, it was a wish. "I don't want a new house just for my family," the letter read. "I want to build a place where all the kids who lost their homes can stay together, so they don't feel alone. Can we do that?" Keanu felt his chest tighten. She wasn't asking for herself. She was asking for everyone else. It was Emma's story all over again, a child who saw beyond her own struggles and wanted to make the world better. Keanu looked at Camila, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You know what? I think we can." And with that, Emma's Wish Foundation took on its biggest project yet, building safe shelters for displaced children across the world. A legacy that would never fade. As the years passed, the foundation continued to grow. Children who had once been recipients of kindness grew up and became volunteers, doctors, and leaders within the movement. Emma, now a teenager, traveled with Keanu and her family, continuing to inspire thousands with her story. And Keanu, he remained the quiet force behind it all. Not for the recognition, not for the fame, but because he had seen firsthand what kindness could do. It had started with a car, a conversation, a simple decision to stop and listen. And now it was something the world would never forget. Because kindness, when given freely, never ends. It only grows. The kindness that would never end. The sun dipped low over Los Angeles, casting golden streaks across the skyline as Keanu Reeves sat in the quiet office of Emma's Wish Foundation's new international headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the bustling city, but inside there was a peaceful stillness, a moment of reflection in the midst of a movement that had grown beyond anyone's expectations. It had been nearly a decade since that fateful day in the car dealership when he overheard a conversation that changed everything. What had begun as a single act of kindness had become a global initiative spanning continents, touching lives, and proving that even the smallest moment of compassion could ripple across the world. Emma, once a little girl fighting for her life, was now a young woman on the brink of adulthood. At 16, she had become one of the Foundation's most passionate voices, traveling with her parents to countries where the Foundation's outreach programs had taken root. She was no longer just the face of a wish. She was the force behind making them come true for others. Ryan and Olivia, once overwhelmed parents drowning in hospital bills, now led a team of thousands, directing projects that ranged from building schools in impoverished regions to funding medical breakthroughs in pediatric care. The Foundation had become more than a charity. It was a revolution of human kindness. Keanu leaned back in his chair, flipping through a stack of letters on his desk, notes from children and families who had been touched by the Foundation. Each one told a different story. a boy in the Philippines who had finally received the heart surgery he needed, a young girl in India whose entire village now had clean drinking water thanks to a well funded by the foundation, a refugee child in Syria who had found a new home and a chance at education. These weren't just letters. They were proof that goodness, when nurtured, could grow beyond borders, beyond language, beyond culture. Just as he was lost in thought, his phone vibrated on the desk. A text from Emma. "Hey, Keanu. I need you at the event center early tonight. I have a surprise. Don't be late." He chuckled, shaking his head. Emma always had something up her sleeve. A night that would go down in history. By the time Keanu arrived at the Los Angeles Convention Center, the event was already in full swing. Tonight was the Foundation's 10-year anniversary gala, a night meant to celebrate how far they had come, and how much further they still had to go. The venue was breathtaking. Giant screens displayed images from projects around the world. Tables were filled with donors, volunteers, and families whose lives had been changed by the Foundation's work. The room buzzed with energy, laughter, and stories of resilience. Keanu wasn't one for grand entrances, so he quietly made his way toward his usual spot near the back. But before he could blend into the crowd, Emma's voice rang through the speakers. "And now," she announced, standing proudly on stage, "there's someone we all need to thank. Someone who never asked to be the face of this movement, but who, without a doubt, is the reason we are all here tonight." Keanu stiffened. "Oh no. Keanu," Emma called out. "Get up here." The entire room erupted into applause, and before he could protest, Ryan was already nudging him toward the stage. With a sigh, he walked up to where Emma stood, microphone in hand, her eyes shining with mischief and something deeper, gratitude. "Do you remember what you told me when I was little?" she asked, tilting her head at him. He smirked. "I told you a lot of things, kid." She laughed, then shook her head. "You told me to always keep dreaming. That wishes don't have to stay wishes." Keanu nodded. "Yeah. And look at what you did with that." Emma grinned, then took a deep breath. "Well, Keanu, tonight, I want to make one more wish come true." The lights in the venue dimmed slightly as one of the screens behind them flickered to life. What appeared next made Keanu freeze. A rendering of a state-of-the-art pediatric medical center, unlike anything the world had ever seen. Emma turned back to him, her expression filled with emotion. "This," she said, gesturing toward the screen, "is the Keanu Reeves Center for Pediatric Care, a fully funded medical and research facility that will provide free treatment for children with life-threatening illnesses, no matter their background, no matter their financial situation." Keanu felt his breath leave him. Emma's voice softened. "You changed my life, Keanu. And because of that, I want to make sure we change thousands more." The crowd rose to their feet in applause, cheering, clapping, some even wiping away tears. But Keanu just stood there, staring at the blueprint, his chest tight with emotions he couldn't even name. He had never needed recognition, never wanted anything in return for what he had done. But this wasn't about him. This was about every child who had ever needed a second chance, and Emma had just given it to them. Slowly, he turned back to her, shaking his head in disbelief. "You did this." Emma smiled. "We did this, together." And for the first time in his life, Keanu Reeves found himself completely speechless, a future filled with hope. In the years that followed, the Keanu Reeves Center for Pediatric Care became a beacon of hope for children worldwide. From cutting-edge cancer treatments to breakthrough medical research, the center became one of the leading institutions in pediatric care. Emma, now an adult, dedicated her life to ensuring its continued growth. She became a doctor, a leader, an inspiration, because she had been given the chance to fight for her own life. And Keanu, he remained the quiet force behind it all. There were no press tours, no headlines that focused on him. But every time he walked through the halls of the medical center, watching children laugh and play, He knew the truth. Kindness had done this. A moment, a choice, a single act of compassion had created a legacy that would outlive all of them. And on one particularly quiet evening, as Keanu walked through the hospital garden, he found a familiar face sitting on a bench, flipping through a sketchbook. Emma. She looked up, smiling. "Hey, old man." Keanu chuckled. "Hey, kid." She patted the seat beside her, and he sat. They stared at the city skyline in comfortable silence, two people whose lives had been forever intertwined by fate, by kindness, by something bigger than either of them could explain. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "You were right, you know." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "About what?" She smiled. "Wishes don't have to stay wishes." Keanu exhaled, looking up at the stars. And for the first time in a long time, he truly believed it. Because the greatest wish of all, the wish for a better world, was already coming true.